So there's a new test that you take in order to see if you get to keep your job. Let's say you have years working for the federal government, maybe even over a decade, strong performance reviews, and then one day your supervisor comes up or you get an email and it says, hey, we got to do a skill check. Make sure you have the right skills. Forget about you working for 10 plus years in this agency. We need to make sure that you're good to go. You're like, what are you talking about? So the way it works now is you want a job, so you do an initial assessment for a lot of jobs. Then you go on an interview. Then they select you. Then you start working. You start getting performance reviews. And now, surprise, there's a curveball. You need to take this test. I got my hands on an email from the Department of Treasury that explains exactly what's taking place here. So check this out. This is the email. It informs the employee they will be taking a mandatory 90-minute assessment through HackerRank. So what's HackerRank? HackerRank is a technical hiring platform. So you have companies like Amazon or IBM. They use it as part of the hiring process because people lie on their resumes. So you have a resume, you don't know if they're telling the truth, you send them over to HackerRank and you make sure they have the skills before you interview. Because if you interview someone based on their resume, they could be lying, you could be wasting a whole bunch of time. So it's part of their process to make sure they're picking the right people to interview. Is it used for a skill check, for a performance review to see how your workers are doing? No, almost nobody uses it that way. But that's what's happening in the Department of Treasury. So what does it check? It's looking for, are you proficient with programming? So this is for like technical positions. I would say 2210, 1550 computer science. The person that shared this email with me, their job series is 2210. Now the skills you would need to be a 2210, they're all over the place because 2210 is broken down into like 10 to 12 different components. So software developer, let's say Java skills. Do you know how to use Python? Do you know how to use SQL? Depending on what your agency has you doing for it. And that's what this thing essentially is to check to make sure you have the knowledge. But is it based on what you do for work? What is aligned with your duties? Or is it just generic coding questions? Is it like those puzzles that you have to solve? Most people say it's like the puzzles. So it's not really directly related to the day-to-day usage of what these individuals do. These people, they look at reference material. It's hard for almost anybody to memorize thousands of lines of code, right? You do it in an academic environment, but when you're on the job, you leverage what works. And what this is telling us is the Department of Treasury doesn't necessarily have enough confidence in their 2210s. They're not confident in their workforce to perform at a technical level. Even though you have dozens of these people, they're receiving the email, dozens of them are. They've been doing the job for a period of time, but now they're being skill checked, right? So can you fail the test? The way that the test is designed, it does not give you a pass or fail notification. The agency is supposed to set up the parameters. What percentage are they looking for? Is it 60%? Is it 70%? Depending on the difficulty, depending on what they have in mind, you'll never know this. They're not going to share that information with you, but there's a certain percentage. Now, what if you say, I don't want to take the test. Get out of here. I've been doing this for over a decade. You've lost your mind. You're wasting my time. Well, if you say that, you lose your position. You get put in a non-technical position. And then what happens beyond that, you can use your imagination, but essentially you are no longer in that technical position. Now, to give you a little bit more context about the situation in the Department of Treasury, this is happening during a major data migration. So they're moving data from legacy systems to the AWS cloud. So a lot of people, they would rather focus on that mission. That is the mission that serves the public. That is what they're trying to do. It's going to make a difference. But they now are worried about the test. They're trying to study for the test. They're taking the test. And it's creating, a distraction. It's a distraction and it's an insult for a lot of people because they've been performing at a high level for many years. And then all of a sudden new leadership comes in and you're making me jump through hoops here. So what happens if you score too low? Let's say the agency set a standard for 70%. And here you come in scoring a 40% for some reason. You get a 40%. What are they going to do with you? Well, they're going to take that information. It's going to be passed up the chain to the CIO level. They're going to investigate and figure out, why could you not attain the standard 70%? And while that's happening, or maybe after that happens, you get retrained, have to take the test again. Maybe you get transferred to a non-technical position while all this is happening. These are all possibilities. You could be asking yourself, well, why would you score so low if you know how to do your job? Well, a lot of people, they're not good test takers. One of the main reasons people have a problem with this website is they run out of time. You have 90 minutes. So if you're a slow test taker, well, too bad. It's going to reflect poorly on you. And there's also built in to this system, there is a plagiarism check. There is an AI check. So don't think you're going to have ChatGPT or some AI. You're not going to have some AI app on your phone and you're like getting the answers and doing, that foolishness. You're not going to be doing that. You can't open up any additional windows. You can't refresh your browser or anything like that. In fact, before you start the test, there's a webcam portion where the webcam turns on. You like smile for the camera to make sure it's really you. That's all before you start taking the test. So I did a little bit of digging to try to figure out, what was the main source of pushback? What were some of the top criticisms when it comes to hack rank? And the number one thing, they're largely math puzzles, and people were having issues with the math puzzles. Number two is it does not focus on practical tasks. And then it's somewhat biased to people that already have a computer science degree. Now, if you're a 2210, largely, you don't need any degree. Now, for 1550, you need a computer science degree or something similar to it. But for 2210, and that's kind of what we're talking about here, you're not required to have a degree. A lot of people have degrees, Maybe your degree isn't in computer science. That should be fine. But it's more structured in an academic way, and that leaves some people at a disadvantage. And there's a little bit of a contrast here, or a contradiction maybe, because the government is moving away from that type of academic background. They're moving away from this college degree requirement, especially when it comes to tech jobs to include 2210. So to force them to take a test that favors somebody with an academic background, kind of doesn't line up. There doesn't seem to be a formal policy on this yet. Maybe the Department of Treasury at some point in time, they release a policy. Maybe they're going to make it completely mandatory for 100% of their people. But all of this kind of falls in line with what's been coming out of the administration, what's been coming from OMB. They want to create more tests, more assessments, so they can ensure that people have their positions based on merit. That's what they want to do there. It's already been happening to a certain degree. If you look at OPM, they've pledged to include more automated assessments for their tech jobs. DoD, starting this month in November, they have announced they're going to be using more assessments for their tech jobs. And the VA. The VA is doing things, they're doing some sort of assessment with their software developers just to assess their skill levels. So more and more agencies could be adopting this. This could easily go beyond 2210. What about 0500? Take a finance test. That could be a thing, right? 0200, take an HR test. There's multiple HR certifications that a person could have. PHR, SHRM, all that stuff. So maybe we see more of that coming out to ensure we have the right people in the right place. Now, as long as it's aligned with the duties and it's practical and not too rigid from an academic perspective, it should be somewhat of a good thing. It's a time waster. If you're highly proficient, you could look at it as it's wasting your time, but that's where we're going. Now, in addition to this, we have less and less people applying to government jobs, especially in specific agencies. So there's agencies like, let's take DoD, for example. You have a lot of people applying to DoD. They've been applying for months. Same thing with DHS, if you look at immigration. You want to be a homeland defender? Thousands of people want to be homeland defenders. But there's other agencies that have seen a dramatic decrease by 40, 50%. People are just not applying. If you want to know more about that, check this video out next. Stay updated by signing up to the free newsletter down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.